if God has made me this person, if God has made me good at these things, and I deny that I'm good at those things, then I'm denying what God has done in my life. And so for me to say that I'm good, or that I matter, or anything like that, for me, that's an acknowledgement of what God has done.
Welcome to the Crucible Project Podcast. The Crucible Project is a nonprofit organization committed to creating a world of men and women who live with integrity, grace, and courage, helping them to fulfill their God-given purpose. This podcast will discuss important and sometimes difficult topics while delivering practical life applications with men and women who are currently practicing this work. We are igniting Christ-like change in men and women through experiences of radical honesty and grace.
Well, hello, everyone. My name is Andy Spell, and I'm one of the interviewers for the Crucible Project Podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and I'm very excited to have my friend Kenny Johnston on here. Kenny, say hello.
What's up, man? It's good to see you, brother.
It is good to see you. So, Kenny, would you tell us a little bit about yourself, what we need to know before we get started today?
Yeah. So I spent most of my professional career as a high school teacher, but I'm now the men's ministry coordinator for Crucible. I am married to a wife that I come nowhere close to deserving, and I've got a 10-year-old son and a 7-year-old daughter.
All right. And so what does it mean that you are the men's ministry leader for Crucible?
Yeah, I was afraid you were going to ask that. It's hard to explain. So the men's ministry leader is my friend and mentor, Byron, and he has a bunch of big ideas, and it's my job to try to put them into some kind of practice. So there's a lot of systemizing ideas and, thinking of new ways to do things and better ways to do things and so on and so forth.
Man, that's awesome. Yeah. Thank you for doing this and for stepping into it for us.
Absolutely.
So when did you do your initial weekend?
I did my initial weekend in North Zolch, Texas in July 2016.
Okay. And what led you to doing the weekend?
Well, initially, what led me there, I got a job as a Bible teacher at a private Christian school, and the head football coach there was a man named David Nelson, who I was becoming good friends with. And he and several of the other coaches there had gone on a Crucible weekend, and they invited me to go. And I was just at a place in my life where I needed something to change, and I gave it a shot, and I've been hooked ever since.
And that's awesome. So when you went on your weekend, what did you want? When that question was asked you, what did you want?
Yeah, it was hard for me to define at the time. I was struggling with a massive amount of depression and self-loathing. Like, I came into that weekend, there was nothing in this world that I hated more than myself, and I was tired of all the self-loathing and the hatred and the shame and all that sort of thing, and I just wanted it to go away.
So on that weekend, how did God show up?
Well, yeah, it's interesting. I initially when I was on the weekend, those feelings actually got worse. I was sitting there, like I remember walking around outside and just kind of meditating on the things that I was struggling with, and a fly landed on my arm, and I just kind of, just without thinking, just kind of brushed it away, and then it kind of hit me. Yeah, that's me. Like, that's how I feel about myself. Is I am that fly. I don't matter. Nobody wants me around. I'm worthless, and I just had to sit in that for a while. And then I remember listening to the stories that the other men were telling, and some of them had some very tragic events in their life, some really big struggles, and I didn't have those. And so I was shaming myself on that also, with like why am I this messed up if I don't have that kind of story in my background? And so it kind of became like I really had to get to the depths of my self-loathing and feelings of worthlessness, because that's where God met me.
And when he met you, did you sense a message or a feeling or something that came on that let you know he was meeting you there?
Yeah, I don't know if I heard anything specifically from God, but I very firmly believe that God speaks through his people. And so the voice of God for me on that weekend sounded like the men that were there on that weekend. It sounded like David Nelson and John Owen and other men like that. And so I believe God met me that way. It was I took a first step on that weekend of just I have the strength to change some things in my life. And then it was later on, through future staffing and groups and things like that message kind of became more filled out, I guess, for lack of a better way of saying it.
Yeah, no, that's good. So on the weekend, I'm going to keep drilling down just for a little bit.
Yeah, yeah.
So was there one at least message that you heard from other men that let you know, okay, I think I can step forward. I think I can make a step forward. I do want to continue this drive forward, that at least I've heard something this weekend that is going to help me do that.
Yeah, it was very simply that I matter.
Mm,
Because I lived most of my life trying to prove that I mattered by being the smartest or being the funniest or something along those lines. And it was just the sense that I matter just because I'm here, just because I exist. And I don't have to earn that. That was an enormous sense of comfort for me because I didn't believe that about myself. You couldn't convince me that I was worth anything leading up to my weekend.
what led to you really feeling like you had to be the smartest or the funniest or those kind of things to have worth? Can you remember kind of what led to that in your life?
Yeah, I think a lot of that came from playing sports as a kid. All the other boys that I knew in school, all of them played some sport of some kind, and so that was the thing to do. And I'm not a natural athlete. It's not my gifting. And so there were several years where I'm playing a sport and I'm trying my best and I'm just not good enough. And the players and sometimes the coaches reminded me of that on a regular basis. And so I took on this message from that nobody wants me around, and that I'm worthless and I'm pathetic and I'm a loser and a failure, so on and so on. And I just started to swallow that and internalize that, and to the point where everything bad that happened was my fault.
Mm,
If anything ever went wrong, then it's because of my failure. It's because I'm a loser.
wow, man, that's a tough way to live. And I mean, I don't know. I hope nobody ever actually said those words, you're a failure, you're a loser, those kind of things. But isn't it amazing by the way that in our society, the way that we live, especially growing up, if we are a young man, I was the same way, who's not great at sports or
Right.
not great at those things, those messages can come on, even if they're not explicitly said.
Right.
Wow. And so you were having to fight that. So you got off of your weekend. Uh, what were some of the things that you did that helped you start anchoring this idea that it could be different and that you do matter?
So that took me a while. Because I had taken on that message of I don't matter, I had gotten to the point where I was kind of preying on other people for their praise and affirmation because I couldn't give it to myself. And that was a habit that took a long time to break. And so there was a while even after my weekend where I was still doing that and I still needed people to tell me that I'm good at something or just good in general. But what changed for that was staying in community with these men that are pouring into me, that are challenging me to kind of get through my nonsense. But the other thing that helped with that was when I started staffing and when I started serving other men, because I used to justify my depression by saying, well, at least I'm not arrogant or prideful. But I kind of had to come to the realization that, like, even in my depression is a form of pride because even if I'm saying these negative things about myself, my focus is still on myself.
Mm.
And so when I started focusing on other people and serving them, then I stopped worrying about finding my own value because I I mattered now.
Kenny, you said something that, man, struck a chord with me big time. So you said you kind of preyed on other people to
Yeah.
get the affirmation or to get things. Gosh, I found myself doing that a ton in my life for probably a lot of the same reasons. So, what would that look like? Like if somebody's listening to this and go, I don't understand quite what he's talking about. For you, what did that look like?
My defense mechanism, because I was not good at sports, was to focus on like developing a sense of humor, or like becoming, just being really knowledgeable about things, and that led me to teaching. But for me, whenever I was teaching, I constantly needed somebody to tell me that I'm good at it. And so I would kind of couch it in phrases like, can I have any feedback, or what did you think about this lesson? What I really wanted was, I need you to tell me that I'm doing a good job. I need you to tell me that I'm a good teacher. I need you to tell me that I'm funny, whatever it is, so that I can kind of feed off of that for a couple of seconds until I need a fix again.
Yeah. Dude, I was that way with my wife. I was a former youth pastor for those listening, and she'd be in a class and I'd get through with it and we'd be driving home and I'd be like, hey, how did I do? And she'd be like, that was good. And I was like, yeah, but what did you really think? Oh, that was good. But I needed her to say, no, it was great, or your best ever, or like that fix. It's so crazy. It was almost like I couldn't believe that it really was good. I needed you to go over the top for me to even hear it.
Right.
And man, that's what makes me start thinking that's how I prayed on her or other people. I really need you to tell me it's the best, even if it wasn't the best, but I needed to at least believe. I don't know. I could not believe the praise of other people.
When I taught high school, I had to be every one of my students' favorite teacher, or I was a failure.
Yeah. Gosh. And
So
what did that weight do to you?
I was miserable. The I mean, I was miserable, and I was living kind of a double life, because I had this front that I was putting up when I was teaching, or when I'm in front of people, that I have everything together, and so on and so forth. But when I got home, or especially when I'm by myself, it's pornography, because I just need, an escape. And it was getting to the point where I was repeatedly asking God to end my life,
Mm,
because I cannot stand another day of being me.
wow, man. And when walking with Kenny over the past few years, man, it's so good to see what God has done in your life. And I know He's still working on you, and I know you're still doing work. For
Yeah.
those of you listening today, soul work never ends.
Yeah.
It's a continuation. So, what are some of the things you've learned about you've learned about soul work that you want to share with other men and women listening today that have helped you at least start the path of moving past this? And how have others helped you? Just what does that look like since your weekend?
Well, I mean, the big thing that I would say is that it's not a one-time fix. I need to feed and nourish my soul the same way I do my body. And one meal isn't going to cut it. It doesn't matter how good that meal is. Continuing in this work, and growing in, just my understanding of where my wounds have come from, how they've affected me, the continued support of the other men in my life. I mean, I love the fact that there may be men listening to this, and none of this is new to them, because I've already shared it with them many times. But it's a process, and it's a process that will continue probably until my last day. But I'm better today than I was yesterday, and Lord willing, I'll be better tomorrow than I am today.
Yeah. What have you learned to truly love about you? And that whether somebody says good job or not, you know that you're good at it.
I am a good teacher. I am a good leader. I am a good husband. I am a good father. I am a good friend. And it has taken a lot of work for me to really believe those things about myself. In part because I didn't want it to sound like arrogance. I didn't want it to sound like pride. But the one of the big realizations I came to was, if God has made me this person, if God has made me good at these things, and I deny that I'm good at those things, then I'm denying what God has done in my life. And so for me to say that I'm good, or that I matter, or anything like that, for me, that's an acknowledgement of what God has done. And so it's not pride, it's actually worship.
Dude, I
You
love
know,
that. That is so good. And so I love you said earlier that, you had to be the best. And now
yeah.
you're saying I'm good. How has just coming to grips that you can be good at something and maybe not have to be the best at something given you peace? Although, folks out there, if you don't know this guy, he is a great leader. He's a
Thank you.
really good teacher. He is a smart man who just knows things. I think he has forgotten more things than I've learned, and those are the things that he does well, and he does a lot of things well, and I can say that about him. But what kind of hope did you get from being able to say, "Man, I'm good," and maybe that it didn't have to be great or that I have to be great at everything? What has that given you?
I can breathe. I can breathe. It's given me some peace, but also the drive to be better is coming from a much healthier place. It's not comparing myself to other people. It's not I have to be the best at fill in the blank or I'm worthless. It's God has given me this gift. Let me praise Him by doing it the best that I can.
Yeah.
And that's so much more freeing than the weight I was carrying beforehand.
Man, absolutely. So, and the comparison game, what does that do when we start playing the comparison game as men, especially?
I never won the comparison game once. Okay. I always lost that. All right. And it robbed me of joy. It robbed me of peace. And it's unfair to the people that I'm comparing myself to, because that's a burden that I'm placing on them that is not theirs to carry.
Yeah. So you learned a lot and you've grown a lot. What is some of the relief you've gotten from the self-loathing? And does it creep up any? And what do you do when it does creep up? If that's a fair question to ask.
No, it's a completely fair question to ask because yes, it does creep up. Those scars do not heal immediately. But they will stop bleeding if I stop picking at it.
Mm,
And so, number one is the community of men that I have in my life that will support me and hold me accountable and not let me fall back into that place. It's also being more focused on others and not so much on myself. There's a oft quoted C.S. Lewis thing about, true humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. And so if I can focus more of my time and energy on serving other people, namely my wife, then it turns out a lot of that self-loathing kind of goes away because I'm not thinking about myself anymore.
wow. Dude, thank you. You just said so much, and any podcast that C.S. Lewis gets quoted in is top notch. So way to go, dude. Thank you.
It's not a Christian podcast until we quote C.S. Lewis.
That's true. So I love that, and I think again, for anybody listening today, for those of you who are listening today, the wounds don't go away. I love that though, but we can stop the bleeding by not picking at it. That was great. I'm gonna figure out how to write that down and use that and act like I'm really smart. There was another part of this that I thought was interesting, and I want to spend some time on this as well. You said that on your weekend that you didn't have the story that some of the other men had. And not every man,
Yeah.
but other men had some stories, and you could point to it and you could say, oh, that's why they're wounded. Oh, that's why this happened. Well, I can see, well, of course they feel this way. But your
Right.
story in your mind didn't stack up. And you talked about that caused you some struggle on the weekend. What were some of the messages you took on from that struggle on the weekend?
I have some tragedies in my life, but I didn't grow up in an abusive household. There was no addictions or issues with substance abuse. I didn't have any of that stuff. There's no abandonment, or anything like that when I was a kid. And so I struggled initially when I got on my weekend listening to other men who had those stories in their life. And yeah, I can understand why they're wounded, but for me it was just a sense of, God, how weak and pathetic are you that you are this messed up and you don't have all of that.
Mm,
And so but what I learned coming from that and listening to those other men's stories is, the circumstances may be different, but underneath all of it, we all want the same thing. We all want to be loved, we want to be accepted, we want to be valued. And so it didn't matter if I had the same story that another man did, if I had a reasonably healthy childhood or not. It was still the same things that were lacking that were causing those wounds. I was still missing acceptance and value and love and all that sort of thing. And so in that case, I was in the right place. I was with other men that needed the same thing.
Man, that's so good. And it's just like in churches, and we both go to churches, and it's when people say, well, I don't have a testimony. Well, I can't give my testimony because I don't have the tragic testimony. No, we still have a testimony because the grace of God comes in for all.
Yes.
And
100%.
And everybody needs the grace of God.
Yeah. And that was part of my shame and comparing myself to other people. It was all the same thing. But I completely agree with you. I still have a story to tell. And I can still talk about the things that God has done in my life. It doesn't matter if the specifics are different, or juicier, or however you want to put it. Because if I'm focused on my story being good enough, then I'm still focused on me.
That's so good. So what would you tell a man or woman out there who thinks, man, I just don't know that I need a weekend like this? Yeah, I've got some things in my life that don't quite add up, but I don't have the tragic story. I don't have this thing that I can point to. And I'm really not sure where it comes from. I just know sometimes I've got this feeling that everything's not quite adding up. What would you say to them about doing a weekend, and why you would encourage them to go as a man who didn't have the tragic story?
Come on the weekend and find out. Maybe you may not be able to identify what it is that's going on. Come figure it out on the weekend. Just give it a try. I talked to a man one time who told me he would sign up for a weekend once he figured out a bunch of things in his life. And I just told him, that's like going to the hospital after you're stopped being sick. This is what this work is for, is to figure this stuff out. And even if you don't have the stereotypical tragic story or something like that, I would just very simply ask, can you be better? Can your life be better? Can your relationships be better? And if so, what is it about you that's keeping it from being better now? And if you don't know how to answer that question, come on a weekend and find out.
Yeah. This isn't just about fixing major wounds. It's about looking at any wound that keeps us from being completely who God wants us to be.
Right.
And the question I love is, are you being the man you feel like God wants you to be completely? And I think if there's a hesitation in us that maybe not, then doing some work around that, soul work around that, can really help.
Agreed.
So
that's why I do it.
Yeah. So you did your weekend, and did everything in your life go exactly the way you wanted it to from your weekend till today when we're speaking?
Not even a little bit. Those struggles did not go away. And the work that I did on the weekend revealed some other struggles that I had to work on, and it began a process. But I'm stronger now than I was. I'm healthier now than I was, and I have tools in place where I can actually work on those things and not revert back to the shame and the self-loathing and so on and so forth. And more importantly than anything, I have community. They see my value not in what I do, but just because I exist.
Man, that's so good.
And that's everything.
That is everything. I know you've had, some tough things that have happened since then. A couple of job changes, and other things. When those tough times came on, what were you tempted to do that maybe the old Kenny would have done? And then what did you do? Or Yeah, just talk about how you navigated those times, because those will happen. Tough times still happen, no matter how hard we work at it. Life is going to be difficult. In your life, there will be tribulation, but be of good cheer. I've overcome the world. Jesus said it. It's going to be tough at times. There will be hard
Right.
times. Uh, what were you tempted to do? How did you fight it? And you may have already said this, but walk us through that.
Yeah, the temptation for me will always be to get small and to go into shame. That every bad thing that happens is because I am a loser and a failure. That's always going to be the temptation, and I always have to keep that in mind so it doesn't control me. And so that's the temptation. But what I've learned from this work is, number one, to not place my value in what I do. Number two, to trust God, because I wasn't doing a very good job of that either. And then number three, and I can't say this enough, to lean on the people around me. There are times when I need them to hold me up, and there are times when I'm there to hold them up, and we do this together.
Yeah, that's good. So, in this community of yours, are these just guys patting, men and women? Are they just patting you on the back and telling you all the time, "Great job, that was awesome, dude, you rock, way to go, let's go"? Or, I mean, is it like, what does that community look like? And how do you know that it is true, authentic community? Because one of the things we want in Crucible is to create a world where we live in authentic community. So, what does it look like in authenticity at times?
Yeah, I mean, I had friends before I went on the Crucible weekend. And so I had the people in my life that would pat me on the back and say, "Oh no, no, you're fine," and so on. But they didn't know how to really process some of the stuff that I was trying to share with them. And so they would, give me the Christian platitudes and God has a reason, and or just, pat me on the back or give me that affirmation that I was praying on them for. Um the community of guys that I have around me now will call me on my nonsense. And so when I get to that point, then they'll first of all, they'll they'll help me process through, like, why is it that you are feeling the way that you're feeling right now, or what is this reminding you of from your childhood, so that I can kind of get to the root of this, and work on the disease and not just the symptoms. And yeah, I get, praise and affirmation from them, but it's about my character, not my actions. And there's a big difference between those two. And I just, through the relationships that I've built, and the time that we've spent together, and the time we've spent in this work, it's just the confidence and the comfort that however I show up, they've got me.
That's good. And so, when you get a compliment from a man who will speak truth to you, like
Yeah.
from a man who they're a minute they'll say, "Hey, I'm going to give you this compliment," and then you say, "Could it have been better, this or that?" Or they have something for you and they give that to you. What does that compliment mean to you from a man who tells you the truth?
It shows me they really see me. And they see not just the Kenny that I put out front, that looks, like he has everything together, but like, you see my brokenness, you see my fears and failures and all that sort of thing, and you still see gold in all of that. And I mean, from somebody who really truly sees me, who really truly knows me, that praise or that compliment or whatever, that's much much more satisfying than anything I got from anybody else, and I can own it.
Yeah.
And that's been the big change for me, is that I'm not brushing it off, or deflecting with some self-deprecating humor or something like that, but like, I can really own what you're saying, because I also see it in myself too, and that's weird. I'm still getting used to that.
Yeah. In fact, I think I was actually in a circle with you one time and somebody gave you a compliment and you deflected with humor. And the leader
Yes.
that was leading the room actually said, "No, stop. just say thank you and accept that you were seen
Yes.
that way, and you did. That was powerful. And I believe it was powerful for you at the moment.
Oh, unquestionably. I needed somebody to say that to me, like basically, like stop being that way and just own that this is true.
I love that. So you've done your work. You're still doing your work. You're in it. You're part of the Crucible leadership. How has it helped you to finally be able to embrace that your wound was a wound? It was a wound worth doing work around, and that it was no less than anybody else's wound. What brought you peace about finally accepting that I do have a wound and I can own it, and it is my wound, and I can do work around this and not be ashamed of it?
Yeah, the biggest thing that helped me own mine is listening to other people's. Um, Again, the circumstances of the story change, but what we really want at a kind of fundamental level, that's all been the same. And so, listening to other men's stories, both guys that, I may judge have a, quote unquote, juicier story than mine, and guys that don't, we all kind of end up in that same place of woundedness because we live in a broken world and we are broken people. It kind of taught me like, I don't have to compare myself to other people. This isn't a competition to see who has the worst wound. Let's just get together and heal each other
Yeah,
instead of trying to be the most wounded.
right. Man, that is so good. That's so good. And I just want people to hear that whatever it is that you're walking with, it is worth doing
Yes.
work around. And especially, and what's interesting on our last weekend, we had a man come in and he said he didn't know what he needed to work on. And he was really very honest about it. But when talking to two or three people, he found out pretty quickly, oh, they're all saying the same thing.
Right.
Maybe I need to work on, and then fill in the blank.
And I've heard that story from many men on many weekends. I don't know why I'm here. I've even had men say, I'm just here to support my friend. And the more they get into it and the more they listen to other men's story, the more they realize, yeah, I got some work I need to do too.
Yeah.
And their lives are transformed just as much as anybody else.
And what I realized were people saw it, whether I saw it or not.
Right. Yeah, my friend David Nelson, he has a saying. When men go back to their lives after the weekend, and people are asking like, what was it like? The line he likes to use is, "I learned things about myself that you've known for years."
Yeah, that is a great line.
Yeah, it is,
That
and
is a
that was absolutely the case for me.
Yeah, me too. And if I was honest, I actually knew it, but I'd hidden some of it because I didn't want to look at some of it.
Right. Or I didn't know how. I didn't know
What?
how to face this.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
because we're not taught how to.
Right, right. I tried to be vulnerable with other people in my life for most of my life, and it wasn't really accepted very well. But being in a place where I could be open and honest and vulnerable, and people could handle that, and people could hold that, and help me through it, changed my life.
Yeah. And how did it feel to sit in a room, and I don't know how many rooms you've sat in since then, full of men that have heard their story, and what is it like? For me, it was a big deal that you're not alone, that you're not the only messed up dude out there. How does it feel that you sit there and going, I'm really not alone?
That is so comforting to know. Because I could very easily tell myself I'm the only one who is this screwed up. I'm the only one who fails this badly. And that was that. I mean, that was just, it was feeding the self-loathing and the hatred and all that. Listening to other men. I mean, we say this all the time that, my work is every man's work, and every man's work is my work. And that's true every time I staff. It's true with every story I hear. I can find a piece of myself in what that man is struggling with. And there's such tremendous comfort in knowing that I'm not alone. But there's also a lot of value in, I think I can help. And if I can help, then maybe I do matter.
Yeah.
Maybe I do have value. Maybe I am here for a reason.
Yeah. That's cool. Awesome. Hey, is there anything else before we wrap up? Is there anything else that you're just like really feel like you want to share to the people listening that you want them to hear from you today?
Yeah, I would just say, regardless of where you are in your life, if life is in the toilet or if life has never been better, there's always room to grow. There's always room to improve. There's always something that we can take a look at, and because none of us are where we're supposed to be yet. And I've always likened the Crucible work to like a GPS. For a GPS to work, you have to have two pieces of information. You have to know where you're going, but you also have to know where you are. And for me, if the journey is being more like Christ, then church and reading my Bible and worship and prayer, all of that is the where am I going. But Crucible shows me where I am so that I can take the best path to get to Jesus. And for me, those two pieces of information working together have been crucial to me becoming the man that I am today. And I'm not done yet.
Yeah, me either. Thank you, dude. And for you guys out there listening, Kenny is one of the men in my life that helped me be the man that I want to be. So thank you for talking today.
And vice versa.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you for listening today. If you want more information about the Crucible Project, please go online to www.thecrucibleproject.org. I think. Kenny, is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. And men's and women's weekends are listed there. And if I got that wrong, it should be in the show notes. Man, thank you for being here today, Kenny. Love your story. Love what you shared today. God bless you, and God bless all of you at home.
Thank you, brother.
For more information about our weekends, please go to thecrucibleproject.org. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Rate and review wherever you are listening, and subscribe on your preferred podcast platform. Also, don't forget to check out myjourney2.com for your free 2-week trial. That's myjourneyto.com. Thank you for listening.